for joining us. Valerie Elson, an actress, and I are going to read the poetry of Ann Stanford. Ann Stanford, born in 1916 and died in 1987, had 8 books of poetry published. She taught herself Sanskrit in order to translate the Bhagavad Gita. She edited The Women Poets in English, which was published by McGraw-Hill in 1972, and she gathered hundreds of women poets that had never been together. And she started back with 2 anonymous poets, many, many years ago, and brought them forward. She wrote a book-length study of the Puritan poet Anne Bradstreet. Her poems were published in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Poetry Magazine. After receiving her PhD in English and American Literature from UCLA in 1962, she began teaching at Cal State University, Northridge, where she taught until 1987. I studied verse and structural grammar with Ann Stanford at CSUN, where I received a BA in English. Ann Stanford won many prizes for her poetry, including the prestigious Shelley Memorial Award. The noted poet critic Kenneth Rexroth wrote this: "Crystalline would be the word for the illuminating clarity of Ann Stanford's poetry, except that hers is not an inorganic, but a living crystal. Few poets today better exemplify the criteria of wholeness, harmony, and radiance that the great philosopher said all art should possess. Hers is an intimate but luminous vitality." We're going to read mostly from the Weathercock that she published with Viking in 1966. The first poem in the book is The Blackberry Thicket. I stand here in the ditch, my feet on a rock in the water, head deep in a coppice of thorns, picking wild blackberries, watching the juice-dark rivulet run over my fingers, marking the lines and the whirls, remembering stains, the blue of mulberry on the tongue, brown fingers after walnut husking, and the green smudge of grass, the earnest part of heat and orchards and sweet springing places. Here I am printed with the earth, always and always the earth ground into the fingers, and the arms scratched in thickets of spiders. Over the marshy water, the cicada rustles. A runner snaps sharp into place. The dry leaves are a presence, a companion that follows up under the trees of the orchard, repeating my footsteps. I stop to listen, surely not alone. I stand in this quiet in the shadow, under a roof of bees. And now Valerie will continue.
The riders for Eunice. We made castles of grass, green halls, enormous stem-lined rooms, and sailed in trees. Close to the backyard fence, we dug a cave. We never finished it, but there it was, plenty of time for moving that last foot or 2 of earth. It was an eternity till Christmas. Do you remember the yellow fields we tussled through? Small mustard retails clinging, and the hikes on Saturday up the grove of oaks. Plenty of time then, and dark came down before we were home, and they were calling and searching. There was a winter year and a summer year. The last was for beaches, salt wind over gaudy pier, and things moved faster. You on the yellow horse, I on the dun. One way the sea, the battleship, the pier, the fishers leaning by the rail, Ferris wheel. And turning still, the shoddy mermaid painted on the wall. Up and down we laughed and caught the rings, and one was gold for summer. Then summer was gone, and the horse bunched warm ripples trotting through orchards down to the practice ring. His eyes were like suns when he changed his gait faster and faster till the trees blurred and the sky, and there were only posts and the wind and the packed earth and the warm beast gathering and springing, how to get off, how to escape. At last I fell. but it was no better. The earth turned under my back, swift, swift we turned out of day to night, today again, light and shadow from a picket fence. And the planet whirled on the sun, a swift carousel. Our heads grow gray, our children laugh in the long grass. Union Station. There was a feather in her hat, smiling and waving as the great wheels turned, calling, "Goodbye, grandmother." We caught the last sight of her, but in the great carnival of Terminal, she is a part of every parting. These things accumulate. The cheerful cries for untold years of summer passing aunts, college vacations, father walking slow. They travel trains unseen and mystical, each followed by his ghostly fellow riders. Sudden as tears they come away and around the ramp, running the gauntlet of the waiting room. For this they bought their long tickets, locked their doors on dust, jogged out of every morning to this moment, this precise place, this point of meeting, solemn and arched as a cathedral. Here where we waited, planning the ambuscade. The plane makes travel nothing, and the steamer beckons a party or a spin-pit palace. But here it is, we learn the weight of travel. It is time spent observing distances, seen through blurred glass, felt in the jolted road, conforming to earth's curving hills and passes, waiting, strange faces, crowds, the memories hanging like posters on the walls beneath the windows.
An anniversary, a country burial. Again, December shadowed and gray, a time to die for one who lived by sun, brings unshaped mornings set behind clouds and takes remembrance a year away. And still I ride in hushed December sound, past fields long gathered and the stubble thin, to the iron gates, and turn beside the grass. The road is gravel then, to the fresh mound. Odd how the shaft of light for an hour shone, though the day was rain before and afterward. Across the pile of bloom, the orchard rose, the restlessness of mourners gazing on. We talked and went away. The flowers there sweetened the air of many afternoons. In an empty place where none but loss shall come, where the greeting whispered, foolish, in the air.
The travelers. Earlier than cockcrow, our birds stir, more promptly than the breeze that wakes downhill toward the sea in the morning, even before the light-eyed children rouse at the first sun's pull, higher than crow or hawk, than mist or cloud, the four-winged cherubim, even high into light rides the early plain, as by a hand of God that lifts pelican, flying dragon, and the whale. And yet our ways are carried there in the bright grotto of the sky, this unnatural flight out of Earth's close garden, whose plummet flare might fill a forest with its broken light. Let air surround them soft, and skies dry clear. Lift them above our trees, cushioned and strange, while I, for love's sake, hear the heavenly stir, and bless to landfall all high travelers.
In the next poem, The Sailor on Kirke's Isle, Kirke, as many of you know, was a sorceress in Greek legend, and in the Odyssey, when the Greek hero Odysseus visited her island with his companions, she changed them into swine. The Sailor on Kirke's Isle. Kirke, within whose isle a bright, oblivious day, the natural passions move toward bottoments of hell. If I escaped your spell, it was alone through motion. Magic by magic known, where words were fair and wine mellowed the conversation, sped my sure hand to motion, clear, negative, and rude. But was one stroke enough? In a strange web of ease, my homeward hurrying feet draw languorous to the shore. The sands entrance my step, unmoved I hear the waves crashing like chains to break the shoreline of a dream. I waste conjectural days in possible delight. The traffic of the mind moves with the drift of time through various modes of love. I stay within a mile of arcs already ended, of glimpses and detail. Offshore the sky echoes the flat sea. Sand drifts over the ship. Motion toward noon. It has a superscription by Christina Rossetti.
Oh.
My heart is like a singing bird. Toward so small hour to sound in such a joy, to trumpet wilderness, to harden close, the bright stem run through me crying joy, and for what measure, for what single close, what stillness comes, what secret, what revealed, that all should lend, that all should turn in light. O fresh, elusive, brightly gilded pain, seance of morning, prophesy your day, light and expectant, fall on me in rain, shine up through hours, gather up such day as stillness tells, as secret and revealed, brought in illusion among clouds of light. Morning shall sing, and noon shall cover all, and shafts of sky and plains of gold combine, and ring in stillness in such syllable as is most common, rarely to combine, as rarities that seraphim revealed once in the opening mist of quietest light, and all for such that quietly enjoy, descends to prophecy and cries its end, that sets its epilogue before the joy of morning bids her hollow shafts to send, the singing noon, when, for itself revealed, it ebbs at ending in extinguished light. The messenger. I don't deny that I believe in ghosts, myself being one. No, not the ultimate last spirit, I mean, but this, a messenger, soft, soft. Last night, half falling into sleep, I rose like smoke, up, curving past the window, floating, a gray cloud seaward, slow and pale. And then the wings. Did you hear the birds piling against your window? A snow of wings crowded and gentle crying over and over, each with a single errand. Light cannot bring, nor ever my tongue would say. Arcade doves, rustling your sleep and calling, crowding upon you, drifting and crying, love.
Above the earth, the mythical experience is love, without an earthly object, one slant of light or vivid emptiness. So I, in this transported past proportion, find my being. And saints that capture heaven's flow rise on the stream beyond, their narrow cells swung above earth, a silent choir being themselves a shivered and tenantless world, a God's breath. Who can hold such high hosanna through the sounding days, but fall again to voice and restlessness when the earth's shadow interrupts their flight? And from such levitation, dropping home, cry out the luster of that glimpsed garden. Pandora. Never, never again the house new or youth precise, or the fresh loaves of hay in the field. And the tree bark shimmers black and white only after rain. The day rose clear-faced and quick, breathing lemon and sage, undoubtedly crystal. Fog was for coolness, not to get lost in, and the wicked rode to ominous music. The box had been left, but I never suddenly opened the lid. The day hung so full, time being happy and short. No reason to fret over a dusty chest in the corner, and I had given my word. But nothing is changeless. While it was there in the house, something crept out, buzzing and small. I heard it at night, an insect whine in the air unseen in the light. And the mornings were sad sometimes, and raising slow, and the day crumpled and worn like a picture handled too much, and I indifferent. Came haze outlasting the dawn, between me and the fields, the horizon too close, and bright days were full of objects not noticed before. Love broke to a trinity. There were too many paths. None seemed to be true, and in the outfields, the horsemen wore various guises, and which I could not trust on their spotted gildings. I have heard of such things, but not for myself. And the silver sifts from the box on my hair and my tears, and the owner is gone, and I shall never be rid of it.
The leopard. Know the covert leopard that lays waste all that I own, the agile claws that tear the mind from calm, that will not rest, but gnaws and paces and is always there. How can one track such subtle enemy, formed to be hidden in a wisp of shade, through forest darker than trees have made? He stalks the stalker, and the hunter flees, though each step is by the other taken. Dense cycling forests without cease, who hunts is stricken and pursues again. So tender bears his victim in his jaw. The prey release may run, yet before cover is reached, he sets the diverting claw, or postures reverie, while the tip tail, blent with the ground, pretends to be away, without emotion, without motion, save for the ranging eyes. And I am whole and hopeful, so to stay, or postures reverie, while the tip tail twitches and coils to magnify his leap, fretful and long his hours, and quick his sleep. And which of us shall win, and which shall die? I cannot tell. Or if the intricate chain is worn in death, let stone say, here am I, and with me the tranquil leopard lain. The Protestant. I never hold a thought, but what the opposite comes straightway into mind, or cannot look at day, except I see the night descending or ascend. The place is where we're bent, and ringing noon is high, judged by an earthward slant. Whatever I know only as April trees sucking the sap to green, or as the simple seas answer a winter sound, unstable, unseen. No sooner say I know than all my fibers turn to prove it is not so. To think God firm in heaven is to intenser learn how shaken is that bough. His good evades us still. The solemn evidence proves death, dark and evil. As a lover or thrush embarrasses the hand, twice savory in the bush, I pray and lie, I see, spirit desired, denied, that when I come, I flee.
Janice, I am not right or wrong, for I am both, and true and false compile themselves in me. I walk two ways, centurion and Goth, yet cannot wrestle from this parity. All things to all, I thus am poetic. straddle a stile, twist good to opposite, will not decide, incapable to pick. Both sides are error into which I'd fit. I front the outworn year, where all must die that raise again under my gaze grown warm. You cannot catch me who before you fly, hearing how fast upon your heels I swarm. And what I unify in my embrace knows me the God who wears a double face. Lost objects. Things disappear. The ball that flew over the fence and caught in space, the ring dropped unnoticed out of view, even the strong box fastened in place. Things rove while you're gone. They change. A pair should not be reckoned two, so common that it is not strange. One glove, one lover, half, one shoe. To know the ache of the intensity lost, think her years, who was her own, slipped off without good night, poor guest. Even a statue shifts in its stone. Motion holds all. The tumblers turn through new gyrations in their airy shells and shunt within till we become lost pieces of ourselves.
Skyrocket. How sure the arc I took, vagrant in speed, self-circling star, and breathed upon my flight, higher and slow and then again to height, past summer bonfires, over the house, the trees, gathering suspense in the attempt to thrust beyond all earth. Then sudden gasp and stop. Elate, I puffed in fire and golden drops, till the one brightness spread to nebulous, and I, a single fleck, fall into dark, while strewn about my sister selves, a shower of small and dimming lights sift lower and lower, and pale and flake, and disappear in calm. The Sleeping Princess. I don't remember when I fell asleep, half up the stair, or dropped from a summer hill, or yawning into bedtime, but the dream so counterfeited me, I could not tell I was asleep. For in that sleep, the sun shone on my eyes. I rose and breathed the day, widened the doors, ran to the summer lawn, and spent the seasons prodigal as snow. Still, I was careful. There the sleeper lay. I took such journeys as were possible. My diary was complete, and it could show much was accomplished, and the days turned full, and yet it was not real. I find the book dusty, unwritten in, where someone called and touched my cheek. The spendthrift years were done. Was it a kiss? I woke, and I was old.
The weathercock. Wind shakes me, and I'm weak and spent with every argument. I doubt, and hang a breath disturbs me. Sensuous and vain, the harsh and soft are one to me. Zephyr or gale, I turn my face to it. North wind and south have whispered, and I go with each. The dulcet evidence of bloom and spring, or the cold reason of encircling storm, both have convinced me, and I yearn with them, yearn as the smoke drift or the lifted leaves. Yet I proportion my stance to the breeze. Wind shall not take me, though he shriek and bite, frighten all other birds to leeward shade, blow down the pigeons from the cooing lofts, sail the hawk back downwind, and send laborious eagles panting to their rocks. I have set my claw deep in the roof's pinnacle, there to hold, while solid objects knock about, each broadside thing. Stiff in this hub to turn and keen, broach to the wind a practiced waywardness. Though the barn totters and hay flies and the wood is precious by pebbles, till the ties of the timber skew, with the beams ajar and the shingles scatter and the great roof falls, I crow, though none may hear. In the vast spinning world, I still point true, I fly here.
The white horse. Where is the white horse? I asked the toyon and the walnuts. The toyon was flowering. The walnuts lifted their leaves lightly like feathers. They were tossing and flowering, and the wind rustled a little. It was dark there under the trees. I tried the meadow. Where is the white horse? I asked the mustard and ryegrass. Have you seen her? The mustard was yellow and the rye going to seed. I could tell the old horse had been there. She had left her mementos. Where is the white horse? I asked the toys down by the corral. They looked at me sideways. One had already drowned in the water trough. The birds had little to say. The corral was deserted. I walked past the toyon and walnuts and over the meadow and up the hill. I knew the white horse had been there. She's lame, I said. She can't go far. And I went up the road to the next stable. There was only a black horse and a brown one. They tossed their manes on the wind and kicked their heels a little. Where is the white horse? I said. She was here yesterday.
The walnuts. There shine always the bright tops of the grove, and within that forest, mysteries of birds. In the autumn, the clear crackle of leaves, and the walnut pickers. Dark skirted after them the gleaners. Trees were everywhere, out of the banks of a foggy morning, outside the windows. The sweet trees leaned, tasseled in spring, in holy burst of leaves. And the oats made meadows of the early year, with nodes for whistles, the juice sweet and thin, grown high to bend into rooms, and yellow flowers hung over the spicy tunnels under the trees. There the grove, hanging forever real in the air, and I, an exile, knowing every turn and turning home, and lost in the dazzled road, the strange, swept premises, and the great trees gone.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
What did you think about, before we move on to one of her next books, her last book, as a matter of fact, what did you think about the poems in The Weathercock?
Well, I just kind of went with the flow, so I'm not sure I was really conscious yet of the matter.
Yeah. Well, you know, as
I can read them. I since you made this for me and I read them, I read them at least 8 or 9 times. You know.
Read beautifully.
Something sometimes different each time. Yeah.
Oh, you read beautifully. You are perfect.
Okay.
What I see is that, you know, she grew up in Southern California. She was born in La Habra, and then she lived here in the Los Angeles area. And she has a nice sense of the terrain, the landscape, the Southern California landscape, the Santa Monica Pier. I assume that was where the Ferris wheel was that she mentioned. And it's also an intimate reality, you know, and also mythic. You know, she uses, you know, Kirky, for example, is one of them. But she just has quite a range. And I always like her sense of proportion and her sense of balance. You know, the book is, she really knows how to make a book. Go ahead.
Oh, well, one thing that I did note that I liked and noticed was, now I've forgotten what it was. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. And there was a great humanness in it too, right? And when she was talking about the grandmother saying goodbye, or, you know, when the graveyard, and, where is the white horse? Someone we have lost, or could be another loss. But it's just a very poignant, too, her poetry.
I just realized what it was that in several poems, she mentions the silver, and it's as though she had maybe stole it from someone, and it appears in more than one of her poems. Did you notice that?
Very nice. I like that. Yeah, that was good. And that one poem that I read, the Protestant, she was a pagan, and her husband was a Mormon. So she had that duality within her. I mean, it's also obviously a philosophical one too, and also a nature thing too, light and dark. But she really is tuned in to the human, to the landscape, to the cycles of life. Just generally speaking, I think women are more tuned into the cycles of life than men are. The next book that Valerie and I are going to read for is Dreaming the Garden. And Dreaming the Garden was her last manuscript. She died in 1987, and I got a call from a friend of hers, Joan LeBombard, and she said she had a manuscript of Ann's, which was Dreaming the Garden. And so she said, would you like it? I said, yes. So that was 1987, as I said. And years later, in 2000, our press, Cahuenga Press, we decided to publish it. And so it was, beautiful artwork by Olivia Sanchez Brown, and a little magic in there, but it's just a lovely last book. And Valerie and I are going to read 4 poems from Dreaming the Garden. From Dreaming the Garden by Ann Stanford. The Sword. I made the sword. Here in the fire I plunged the steel, white hot, bearing the beat of the apprentice's hammers, 1, 2, 3, over and over on the steel bar, over and over the firing, the beating of hammers, till the bar is dense with the struggle, and I bend it again and again, over and over the pounding, the cutting, the bending, layer on layer, the crude bar resists me. I have given it courage. It is held day and night against heat, against pounding. At last I have shaped it, hardened its edges. It becomes a mirror of my hand, hardened in fire, with a metal that resists and is beaten, folded and beaten to the luster of the still pond that is windless, that carries one gold curving branch in its center, spread with the gold leaves of springtime, and waiting to bring you this mirror, this hardness, this ardor of hammering home.
The Weaver. I am the weaver. Before the last frosts, I planted the seeds covered with straw from the reeds by the river, green rising under the moon in springtime, the jagged long leaves lifting a tide around me. In summer, the blue seeds appeared, grew into harvest, and the blue of indigo rose in the water with the cloth I had woven, took the color of sky, took the azure of evening, took the darkness of blue night without stars, shining, the cloth that I carried down to the river stones, carefully washing the dross from the workroom, leaving blue caught as the clear afternoon looking down on the river. The sedges dripped toward the water, dripped in blue, dropped from the sky, and the broad channel ran from the cloth over the blue rocks until the sky that would darken into small ponds where the frogs turned to blue statues in the cold streams of midnight. I have woven through springtime at dawn in my shuttle. Now the blue sky dries in my yard. This blue will not fade. It will darken to midnight. It will tell of the river. It will speak of the weaver. It will last you 100 years out of myself, out of the sky and river woven. The bell. I am the bell. I am from earth and fire. Now the brazen gleams around my shoulder. I hold your prayers, burned to ash and sent to the skies with my echoing. I echo your names and the names of God. Further and further the ring widens, grows fainter, never dies away, but quivers alone at the edge of the hills, caught like night's frog below the mountains. Long and deep the hollow within me, where the sound comes to birth, where the shudder first catches the bronze at my side, vibrates and travels round and round my surface like the thongs of a sling, whirling in air till it borrows flight from its circling. And the sound flies out while the trees flutter with birds flung like notes to the wind. And the river catches my singing sound, and the wind carries my notes like names of the gods over and over.
The last poem in the book is 365 poems. They will be floating from my mouth like doves, like bright scarves from the sleeves of the magician. Look, I am spinning 5 of them over my head. It has been a bad dream when I forgot to twirl one like a flag every day, to walk into town like a parade, with flutes and drums with timbrels. They will be chariots drawn by lions. They will be gazelles and leopards. They will fly around me like a flock of birds. They will be my traveling companions. They will gnaw at me day and night like minnows, or devour me whole like the whale. I will stand among them as among trees of a forest, calling, these are all mine. They will tell me secrets. Wherever I go, like the roll of drums, salvos of guns, rockets kindling the air, they will arrive day and night. I will beg them to go away. They will torment me like gnats, swoop by like hawks at noon, bewilder my dreams at evening. They will say, welcome home. Now, what vitality for a woman, written not too long before she dies. I mean, you can sense the strength and the vitality in the writing, can't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And one thing she said that, when people talk about poetry, I always feel that to be a poet, you have to learn the tradition. And that means going back, at least in the West, back to the Greeks, Homer, Sappho, Hesiod, come forward through Dante, through the troubadour poets, through Spencer, Milton, Shakespeare, on and on, through the romantic poets, through Whitman and Dickinson, and then into the 20th century. You also have to write. I mean, Ann Stanford, even though she was a teacher and she had a big load, she went to her studio every day and wrote. In other words, she was a poet. She made use of her gift. And you can see in the poetry, I mean, there's 2 different books, and they're both different forms.
Well, maybe we can cover the second book another day.
That would be great. That would be great. We still have a little bit of time left. What I would like to do, if I may, is, as I said earlier, she edited The Women Poets in English from McGraw-Hill, 1972. And let me just read the opening section of the book, because we're going back to a time when it was important for women poets to get out into the world. And so this is one of the contributions. This is the introduction. From the first 16 centuries of our era, only a few names of women who recited or wrote their poems have come down to us. But we may be sure that wherever poetry was part of a culture, some of its women were composing and helping to preserve its songs and legends. The women whose names are remembered suggest the presence of others unknown. This collection begins with 2 anonymous poems from the Anglo-Saxon, which several leading scholars believe were composed by women. Both use women as narrators. In The Wife's Lament, circa 900. The speaker is friendless in a land far from her own, estranged from her husband through the machinations of his kinsmen. She mourns the loss. I made this song about me full sadly, my own wayfaring. I, a woman, tell what griefs I had since I grew up, new or old, never more than now. Okay? And then it goes on from there. And then it says here, to skip down a little bit, 200 or 300 years after the making of these laments, a woman became famous for her rhyme tales of romance derived from Celtic and Breton love. Marie de France, who wrote during the last half of the 12th century, was connected with the court of the Norman King of England, Henry II. She composed her lays in Anglo-Norman, the language of the court. All during the Middle Ages, they were popular, so popular that a 13th century chronicler, who obviously did not care for fiction, wrote thus of her: Dame Marie, who turned into rhyme and made verses of lays which are not in the least true. For this she is much praised, and her rhyme is loved everywhere, for counts, barons, and knights greatly admire it and hold it dear. And they love her writing so much and take such pleasure in it that they have read and often copied. These lays are wont to please ladies who listen to them with delight, for they are after their own hearts. And then it goes on, Anglo-Saxon and Norman, etc. So, there have been many innovations since then. When did you first get interested in writing poetry? I know you're an actress, and I know you've also taught, and you're also an artist. When did you first get interested in writing and or poetry?
Well, it was, at a young age, and I think that's true of a lot of women, probably in my teens. And I know I thought I was really smart, and I and I had a poem that I found poems, and I changed them a little bit, and had them rhyme and do different things, But they weren't I was really, borrowing them, not they weren't coming out of me. But anyway, that was probably when I was 12 or 13, around that time. I'm sorry.
Where were you living at that time?
Well, at different times, I lived different places. Obviously, people do that. So in my late teens, I was in a children's home. And there were 3 or 4 teenagers as myself, and then the rest were maybe 15 little children. And it was in San Diego, and I lived there for 2 years. But the poetry, I still have a lot of poetry, and I hope that I get a chance to get that sorted out. And
that's good. It's good to keep writing. And the one thing that I think is important as we grow older is to keep learning. Whatever your own journey is. I mean, nobody's really in competition with anybody else. It's what your own inner journey is, to just fulfill that journey, whether it's acting, whether it's writing, whether it's painting. But as long as you know what your own journey is, and just to keep working on that and keep executing those, the thoughts, the images, the words that come to you, and write them down. I mean, you saw in that last poem by Ann Stanford how she was just beleaguered with words that wanted to be spoken through her. And, I think the more you invite the muse, I give thanks to the muse. You may call it the divine feminine, the divine creative, the divine mystery, whatever your name may be. But I give thanks every night of my life. And I break down sometimes when I'm writing and give thanks, because you have to be receptive. As a younger man, I used to think that, art and poetry was you just go out there, a young man being aggressive. But then I realized, no, you have to be receptive. You have to be able to hear. You have to, in acting, we have to listen to one another. And then obviously we have to listen to what comes to us in our unconscious, or, that mystery, wherever it is that those, images and creative activities arise and come through. And so that was one of my big lessons, is learning to be receptive. One thing I like to do, I don't know about you, but I like to write early in the morning. I started doing this years ago because I just wanted to write when I got up out of bed, and I didn't want to listen to any news on TV. I didn't want to listen to radio. I didn't want to listen to what anybody else said. And I just wanted to allow those, if I may use the word, pure thoughts that come to me, and then execute them. Sit there on the sofa and write down a page or two, whatever the energy was in that particular poem. When do you usually write? Do you have any particular time?
I do not, and I don't write much, but I am learning, and I know how, and I miss writing. So that's why I'm very thankful to you for giving me this opportunity. And I really, I didn't know this poet, and now I know her because of you bringing her into my life.
Well, I always enjoyed your writing, and I do too. And I'm thankful to you for your writing. I'm also thankful to Jennifer Clymer and Channel 22 for giving us this opportunity, because it's a wonderful opportunity to keep. A year ago, I wrote a letter to Bob Beecher, and I thanked him for presenting a half-hour film that I was in at the theater. And he wrote me back and he said, "Harry, you don't have to thank me." He said, "My job is to extend the creative lives of the residents here." And, in the old days, poets, they had patrons, okay? We're taken care of here. We worked hard. Some of us put money toward MPTF out of our paychecks year after year. But whatever that is, that's beside the point. The point is, it's here for all of us. And the people here who work here, Channel 22, the caregivers, the staff, everybody, I could never be enough thankful for what they have given us to take care of us, and also give us the opportunity to keep being creative.
Very good. That's really true. And we have, I think, something within us that says this is the right thing. And we all have some kind of energy that we wish to spread happiness and pleasure, but we can look at the bad side at the same time and come up with our own questions and longings and share them with the world, really.
Exactly. Exactly. And years ago, a poet said that the purpose of poetry is praise and affirmation of life. And Robert Graves, who wrote The White Goddess, he said there are two subject matters for poetry. One, life and death, and two, the triple-headed goddess, which can be viewed a couple ways. It could be viewed as the waxing, the full moon, and the waning, or it could be viewed as the young maiden, the middle-aged woman, the matron, and then the elderly woman. So we all have similar cycles, living, being born, living, facing death, and embracing it. And, I always feel the main point as we grow older is not only keep creative, but to have a dignity too as we grow older, and to keep doing our work. And this is certainly a wonderful place for it,
I would also offer about dignity. One of the things that we say is creativity is ageless. I also think the need for dignity and to be truly heard by those that you're trying to connect with, that is also ageless. One of the things we do with the Instant Film Festival, it doesn't matter if you're in high school or if you've been retired from the industry for 40 years, everybody gets to speak into the creativity because we all have a unique perspective, and it's not diminished because you've lived a long life. It's also not diminished because you haven't lived a long life. you know, we all tap into the creativity at any age, at every age.
I agree. I remember asking one time a 4 or 5 year old boy one time, he was with my son. I said, "What is imagination to you?" And he says, "Pictures in the mind."
Wonderful.
Children. You know, didn't Picasso say we have to be like children because they have a sense of wonderment? One thing I noticed, a friend of ours used to teach at a magnet school in LA, and he would put an anthology of poetry every year from, you know, 3rd or 4th grade through high school. And I noticed that the younger children had really a great sense of metaphor. And then when they hit junior high and they started analyzing things more and more, I noticed their lines got longer and more analytical and less metaphorical and wondrous. But, you know, that's one of the process we pass through. But we always have to keep unlocking that sense of wonderment in all of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with us, for sharing your creative expression, and hopefully for inspiring a few people to either read. And as you know, reading poetry is not so much about reading the words as it is interpreting the feeling and expressing that. And you both do such a beautiful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Val.